throw this in the trash, please? Thank you.
Trash?
All right, thank you. All right, can we have some quiet, please? Hello. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the zoning.
Gentlemen,
Quiet, please. We
thank you.
gotta start. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Wareham Zoning Board of Appeal for tonight's meeting, December 12, 2018, Wednesday. It is 6:30 p.m. and we are at room 320 at the Multi-Service Center, 48 Marion Road, Wareham, Mass. We'll make a call. I'll call the meeting to order. I'll make a roll call. My far left, alternate member Jake Morrison, attorney Jen Kendrick, and to my right, our clerk Jim Akabachi, and myself, the chair Nazir Kolasi. Also present, town consultant, professional engineer Charles Rowley. We have some quick business to do, and we'll get back to you. Just give us a few minutes, just a couple of minutes. The minutes, November 14.
Unfortunately, I haven't had a chance to read them. I can look at them right now. They look in order.
We'll table it.
Thank you.
Where's the file for?
Pardon me? The file for it's up here.
All right, let's table the
Regular
minutes
copy.
to the end. 6-18 Priscilla Ave. Priscilla Ave, okay, he said to table it too, he's gonna be late. That's fine, we'll go with the public hearing. 34-18 Stephen and Cheryl Urasha, 9 Jordan Road. Just wanna let everyone know tonight, there's only 4-member boards tonight. You have the right to be heard by 5 members. So if you choose not to open, you could continue the hearing until next time. If you choose to go with 4 members, you have to get 4 votes out of 4. Okay? In this matter, I can't say, I still have a conflict from previous time, so Councilor, you have only 3 boards. Well, we're gonna open, read the hearing and the records for the, the advertisement for the hearing, and we'll go from there.
This is Yashura, right? This is the one. 3418. 9 Jordan Road.
This is it.
Okay, just making sure. The Zoning Board of Appeals will hold a public hearing on December 12, 2018 at 6:30 p.m. in room 320 of the Wareham Multi-Service Center, 48 Marion Road, Wareham, Mass. 02571. To consider petition number 34-18 for a variance from the requirements of Article 3, Section 320, Article 14, Section 1470 of the Wareham zoning bylaws to Stephen and Cheryl Ushura, 9 Jordan Road, Wareham, Mass. 02571, seeking to construct an accessory apartment and shed located at 9 Jordan Road, Wareham, Mass. Assessors map 114E, lot PG14 in the R130 zoning district.
All right, Councilor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Richard M. Cirque for the petitioners. This amended petition sought 2 forms of relief. One was a use variance for an in-law apartment, and we're withdrawing that part of our petition. I submitted a letter to the board tonight indicating that subsequent to the filing of the amended petition, the Urashas executed and recorded a declaration of restriction, which I've given you a copy of, pursuant to which the building commissioner agreed to issue a certificate of occupancy for the Urashas property in consideration of their agreement that, 1, occupancy of the lower story of the subject property shall be restricted to a non-rent paying occupant who shall have unimpeded interior access to the first story of the subject property, and 2, the lower story of the subject property shall not be occupied by a rent-paying occupant lacking interior access to the first story of the subject property without a variance from the Board of Appeals if then required. As a result, the Urashas hereby withdraw their petition for a use variance for an in-law apartment, as that relief is no longer needed. The other part of the petition has to do with a variance from the front setback requirements because of a shed. And because of the fact that there are only 3 people among the board who can sit on this matter, and 4 are needed for relief because the chairman has to disqualify himself, we're asking that that matter be continued.
Okay, very well. I guess the 26th, we don't have a hearing, right, day after Christmas? You guys willing to come on December 26th?
2 days after Christmas, I'll come.
I'd be here,
I won't be in.
because after,
I won't be in.
I'll be ho happy to be here.
All right,
I'm leaving January 1st. January 1st, I'm gonna be back on the 15th, so that might,
You're leaving on the 1st?
first, and I'll be back on the 15th.
Okay.
I guess it's the 16th. I'm sorry, it's the 23rd then. Now, on the 26th, should we put on the 26th if another member, well, you still have 3, never mind. Doesn't matter, so the 23rd. So do I
Okay to
have,
think out loud.
even if we got a member, Jen's not here, and Jake is not here on the 9th, so it is the 23rd. All right, so we have a motion,
You
I'll
said,
entertain
you're
a
saying
motion.
23rd, but you mean 26th, right?
No, 23rd of January.
Okay,
So
Okay.
I'll entertain a motion for that.
so moved.
So do I have a second to continue public hearing 34-18 for Stephen and Cheryl Urasha, 9 Jordan Road, till January 23rd, 2019. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, oppose, abstain. Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll do the continued public hearing. We're just gonna jump to 33-1896 LLC. Counselor?
I believe I may be all set on that. I'd rather not pick a new date. I will be in touch with the board.
Okay, I guess the 26th, there's no hearing, and the 9th is no, so I guess we'll hear from you. Thank you, Counselor.
Thank you.
Okay, 23-18, Anthony Grasso, 1 Ray Ave. Anthony Grasso.
That was
This-
96 that
gone.
continued, right?
No board, sorry, no, not enough members. So everybody here for Farringham Road, 96 LLC, it's continue, we'll let you know when it's continued till. Sorry about that.
Well,
No, you're still here, come on up.
Okay, is Ray Ave here?
He's here.
Okay, come forward, please.
Tim, anybody at the center table, remind them to use that handheld one.
You having trouble with the, okay. All right, wait. We've got a handheld microphone for him, because those mics don't seem to be.
Ah, okay.
Let the dust settle a little bit. And I have to abstain on this one. I have to. No, I sold him the property.
I'll just move this stuff.
Yep.
I haven't got your folder up yet.
But before we get you folder,
Yeah, we got 'em right here.
we don't have enough member to open your case because Jim can't sit in your case.
I know.
So,
Can I at least give a statement, introduce myself? Is that fine?
did we open the case last time?
No. Cancel the meeting.
No,
Oh,
it's
the
been
meeting-
open, but it's been continued.
It continued.
Oh, it's continued.
It's been opened. I believe this was read in July 11th.
Yeah, but that was just a simple drawing plan.
No, his concern right now is, has this been opened? This matter's been opened, the board opened the hearing.
Right, and we
we've
continue.
from
Let
thereafter.
me ask you something, would you be willing to give us continuance? You give us an extension until January 23rd? We could discuss this matter, but
I won't be in the country.
So it has to be later.
It has to be the end of March. Well, I'd like it to be the end of March, so that therefore I can get better prepared.
okay,
I just got
Right.
always
we could, listen, I could break the rules, go through it quick to help you out what you should do.
No, I don't want to do it quick.
No, okay, you want to make a statement, so
Yes, oh, yes, I'd like to make a statement, that's what we stated.
the thing is, I don't think you can.
All right, if I can't,
So when you wanna come back in February?
the end of February.
13 or the 27? Hold the mic, he can't hear you.
Yep.
Yeah. How's that, Bob? Better, thank you, sorry, because those...
We need it on the record.
So,
27th.
27?
Yes.
You will give us your verbal extension, that you will give us an extension until the 27th.
Correct.
Very well. So he's verbal.
We need to vote on
Can you
that?
write something quick
Sure, sure.
on a piece of paper? We just gotta sign, we'll give it to the girl in the office.
Can I ask the board a question?
Yes.
Can I ask Charlie some questions? I do have some questions.
But you said you don't wanna discuss it.
Okay, all right, then we won't.
You know what I'm saying?
We'll leave it alone. Thank you very much.
But we gotta
Okay.
get your signature here. So this is, just give me a minute to write something. Just hang in there for a minute, Anthony. This is
While we're doing that, I would like to speak to Charlie if I can.
23.
Not really, it's an open public hearing.
I'm sorry.
That's all right. So I'd like to entertain a motion, any of you, to continue it to February 27.
So moved.
So we have a motion by Jen. Do I have a second, Jake? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, oppose, abstain, so it is until the 23rd. Let me just take some. Mr. Grosso, it's continued, just off the record. I read Mr. Charlie's comments. You should really work with him on them.
Yes, I.
Okay, it's very important.
Monday afternoon.
I went right through them, I highlighted them all,
Right.
and they're very reasonable, so you should really work with him on it.
Problem, I'm willing to work with the board.
Anthony, just sign here that you're granting us an extension till the 27th, so we can throw it in your folder.
As long as it doesn't cost me.
And,
Thank
Just-
you very much.
yep. Now, you're telling him to chat with Charlie, you mean outside this meeting?
Yeah, like, make an appointment with him and talk to him.
Okay.
Thank you very much, sir.
No, you're welcome. Okay.
Okay, so this is going in the folder just for CYA.
All right,
This is what he handed us.
so continue, 2318 Ray Ave.
Jake or Jan, do you want to keep these and peruse them, or do you want to turn them back in and keep it? Okay. And your set is right there. Let's put this aside.
All right, 38-18 Sunrise Development, 2382 Cranberry Highway.
Sunrise Development, this is the solar.
Should have plans, Mr. Chairman.
All right, thank you.
Delivered plans to the planning office on Monday. And a supplemental.
Got a fairly fat file here, so we must have. This has been opened, hasn't it?
Yes, sir.
All right. Public hearing's still open. We just need your names, gentlemen, for the record, and let's proceed.
Mr. Chairman, my name is Bob Rogers with GAF Engineering.
Joe Harrison with Sunrays Development.
Jim McCarthy, 2384 Highway, Cranberry Highway, LLC.
Dennis McCarthy, 2384 Cranberry Highway, LLC.
Okay, so do you want to fill us in since last time?
Mr. Chairman, I believe the initial public hearing was on October 21st, October 24th. At that time, we were directed to coordinate with Charlie regarding the drainage since the initial public hearing, we went out and we did additional perk tests. They're indicated on the plans. We met with Mr. Rowley to review those test pits. He asked us to perform some permeability testing, so we engaged with GZA, a geotechnical firm, and they went out to the test pits that we had previously done, and they did permeability testing. Permeability testing results were showing a faster infiltration rate for runoff into the ground than our initial assumptions. So we produced a supplemental drainage report to evaluate the basins as they were currently designed based on the new numbers and including some storage allowance for replacement soil. It's all the technical aspects of the drainage. We met again with Mr. Rowley earlier this week, and we received Mr. Rowley's review letter this afternoon, and we got a chance to go over it. And Bill Madden and I put together our responses. So what you've got in the letter that I gave you this evening, it has all of Mr. Rowley's comments followed by our responses.
I think it's working.
So one of the other things that we did for the board's benefit and Mr. Rowley's benefit is when we located those additional test pits, we put orange flags along the 50-foot buffer zone to Great Hill Mobile Home Estates. And so I've given you photographs with the letter, and the first photograph is at this location, and the last photograph is roughly here. And so you can see that some of the areas have sufficient shading, and then there are other areas where we propose to set the condition that 6 to 8 foot high arborvitaes and white pines would be planted. It would be a field determination is what we're requesting. Once the trees are cleared for the solar facility, then at that time, with Mr. Rowley's input, we would look at the areas where we would, put the new trees in for screening. As I'm sure Mr. Rowley will tell you.
Okay, hang on.
And we gotta
Can you stop for a minute?
get this guy's name to rename themselves.
Okay. All the microphones in front of you are dead. They're only there to look pretty. Whoever is speaking needs to hold that and speak into it.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Sorry, it's just... So he wants, the person recording this has asked you to pass the mic and state your names again.
Please, because we
Just
didn't
like-
have them for the
We didn't have,
records.
he never got it.
So I'm Bob Rogers with GAF Engineering.
Joe Harrison, Sunrays Development.
Jim McCarthy with 2384 Cranberry Highway, LLC.
Dennis McCarthy, 2384 Cranberry Highway, LLC.
All right, very well. Let's proceed.
Thank you.
So you're welcome. So in my opinion, Mr. Chairman, we have two issues. We have the stormwater issue and we have a screening issue. And, again, Bill and I, Mr. Madden, went over this quite a bit, and I'm here tonight to say that we're confident that the basins that we have designed and the amount of storage that will therefore be provided based on the permeability testing that was done by GZA, that they're going to function better than the initial calculations, and the end result is going to be less runoff to the existing basins at the bottom of the hill. And we're fully agreeable to his recommendations on your conditions of the permit. We just don't agree with his suggestion of not developing the upper portion of the property.
I did go through Mr. Charlie's letter. Now, when he's talking about the till, when you guys did the test, Is it possible, Charlie, in these basins, they could dig, move and replace with suitable sand?
Doing that is a little bit like digging the bottom of a bathtub out, putting in some sand in it, and still encapsulating the sand within the limits of the bathtub and expecting it to function like it is all sand. Title V doesn't allow that for the obvious reason that just digging out an area to allow the water to go through, it's still going to get trapped by the surrounding soil if it's less than permeable. So we're not in a Title V situation, but we're in a stormwater situation where the conditions are even more concerning because of the rate and the volume of runoff we're talking about. When you talk about a septic system, it's relatively small flows. Chances are the infiltration area has a chance to settle out or to dry out a little bit. In this particular case, you could get one storm right after the other, which could impact the drainage significantly. What was done here, and I'll try and paraphrase my concerns and my reason for making the suggestions that I did. I have a history with this site that goes back almost 40 years. Back in the early 1970s, my father's office was responsible for the design and construction of Great Hill Mobile Home Park. At that time, DEQE, now DEP, was the state agency that approved all septic system design for mobile home parks. So that went to the state to be designed, to be approved. During the process of construction, I happened to be out on the site one day attempting to get access to the top of the site. And in order to get access, I had to ride a Medeiros and Smith bulldozer up Great Hill Drive to get there because of the water that had concentrated down at the bottom of the hill and it was all mud. The same conditions that exist there exist on this site and have existed since the days when that same office, my dad's office, attempted to conduct a series of septic system tests and so forth, percolation tests, deep test holes on that property, for the same purpose, which was to construct a mobile home park site. It never came to fruition. The second thing that I'm aware of is Holly Heights, which is another mobile home park, which has its frontage over on Charlotte Furnace Road. That development, the project site, the location where the Wareham water tank is situated, Great Hill Mobile Home Park, is all a part of a glacial formation which contains substantial amounts of what they call glacial till. It's a very tight material that when you loosen it up by excavation, you would think that it was wonderful stuff. But it contains a substantial amount of silt and very fine material that when it gets wet or when it gets compacted, there is no infiltration down through that soil. When you look at 5 out of the 6 of the test holes that were done, which I first requested, you may recall that I requested those test pits at the very initial stages of this project, as well as the flagging of the 50-foot buffer. That the project only consisted of 3 test pits, and they were down within the open area. 3 additional tests were done up the slope. Of the 6 tests that were conducted, 5 out of the 6 tests showed that there was a modeling layer roughly 3 feet down from the surface of the ground. As I put in my letter, that modeling layer is indicative of one of 2 things. Either it's indicative of the coming and growing of groundwater, where it goes up and down. First it's there, and then it dries out, it oxidizes, and it causes a rust layer. Or it's the result of water coming down from the surface, hitting that impermeable layer, and not being able to travel any more vertically, but it travels horizontally across that. And when periods of dry weather come, that dries out and it oxidizes. I think the condition here is not with groundwater because of the elevation. It's more with the conditions of the subsurface soil conditions, which are significant and very typical of conditions of glacial till. The back portion of the site, which is roughly, when you look at the topography on the plan, the grading goes up the slope. There's an access road that goes between 2 existing drainage basins, goes up a relatively steep slope, and then breaks and flattens out. For another 100 feet or so, the land is clear. And there's a windrow of stones that were pushed up there as a part of the clearing operation for the construction of that open space. From that point on, it's heavily wooded with a new growth of white pine and underlying, almost looks like laurel, but it's a very, very dense, low-growing material, maybe 18 inches high. It extends all the way from that point, all the way to the boundary of Route 495. That area, at the present time, is probably absorbing a substantial amount of runoff, surface runoff, that goes onto that site in the form of rainfall. A number of years ago, when that entire site was stripped, and you can see the evidence of that because there are tree stumps in there that are this big around where they were cut off, and there are surface boulders and so forth that indicate the type of conditions I've just described to you. When that happened, there were situations that developed out on Route 28 that included the overtopping of the drainage basin that's over onto Route 28 because of the amount of surface runoff that it was getting from up on that property. Not only that property, but also the developed property, which contains 2 or 3 buildings at the present time. The overtopping of that basin was relieved by the construction of a berm and eventually a connection into the stormwater system that actually is in the state highway, which travels past the entrance to Great Hill, runs underneath Cranberry Highway into Stroh's Folly Brook, which goes ultimately downstream behind Walmart. In analyzing the second series of tests that Mr. Rogers has indicated, the infiltration test I requested, it was on the basis of the valuation that I saw of the test pits, which indicated that 36 inches down, there was a layer which potentially could be very, very tight. I wanted to find out what the infiltration rate was in that material, because if that was a very tight material, you're going to have problems with runoff. When the tests were done, except for 2, there were 6 different new tests done. All but 2 were done within 12 inches of the surface of the ground. The other 2 were done roughly 30 inches to 36 inches down, which was right at that border between the upper layer of soil and the poor layer of soil where that modeling took place. So although the rates that they got may have been faster than what they initially used in the drainage calculations, I'm not convinced that they have done sufficient testing of that lower layer to convince me that the infiltration will take place that needs to. Realizing that those conditions exist, and I have a very significant concern about that soil capacity to take that additional runoff if you clear the entire site. My recommendation to your board is that that upper layer, starting at a point 100 feet in from the existing line of clearing, be left in its natural state to absorb the runoff that's coming off the top of that hill, and to allow the balance of the site to be constructed essentially as they have shown on their plans. With respect to the buffer zone, I walked it. There are several areas along the buffer zone to Great Hill where if you clear to the 50-foot line, there will virtually be no buffer. I don't have a problem with leaving it to the point where the land is cleared so you can see what areas are needed, but I would not want to be put in the position of being in the position of determining what the density should be. I believe that it should be placed on the plan in some fashion that can be looked at the time of planting so that it can be determined if it's in compliance with the approval or it isn't. To leave it up to one individual, I believe, is subjective. What I might consider to be dense might not be someone else's consideration as to what it would be.
You're talking
dense.
about the buffer with
I'm
the
talking
trailer
about the
park?
buffer.
From the highway?
Trailer park.
No, this is the line which parallels Great Hill, and it's the line on the south portion of the plan that you see there. There are portions of it which are already dense, and if you were to clear up to the 50 feet, I think you'd be fine. But there were
Who's
many
the
cases
neighbors
where I
there?
walked it, where there would be no buffer left if you
This is
cleared
Great
at the
Hill right
50-foot
here.
line.
This is Great Hill.
So abutting the trailer, you think?
Correct, correct.
And they're proposing 50, you think
They're
they should go?
proposing 50 if, as an example, if the upper portion of the land were left as is, then there would be no need to redo any buffer zone in that area because there would be no solar panels for anybody to see. But there may be portions, and I can't tell you exactly where those open areas are with respect to the area that would be left. But if there are any, then they should be identified so that the landscaping can be determined and approved as a part of the special permit, so that if I or anyone else goes out to inspect, I've got something to evaluate the plantings against, not just a subjective opinion as to whether or not it's dense or not.
Okay,
So that's essentially my concern and what I put in the letter. I respect what Mr. Rogers and Mr. Madden have put into their design. We happen to be in disagreement with whether or not it's consistent with the type of site that we have here. If it were in a different location, with flatter topography and better soil conditions, my concern would not be anywhere near what it is today. But knowing the history of the site, knowing the topography of not only that site, but the properties on either side of it, the previous conditions, the lack of fact that there's been any construction up on that hill at all over a period of roughly 30 years, it leads me to believe that there are serious conditions with the subsurface infiltration. And that's why I'm suggesting that this is a good reason to limit the construction, because of that particular physical characteristic that seems to be apparent in the site. So that's my overview and basically what I put in my letter. I did put some recommendations in it at the end of the letter, should the board decide that they would issue a special permit. And that, of course, is up to you as to whether or not you want to accept those or do something else. But with all due respect to Mr. Madden and Mr. Rogers and their ability and their engineering design, on this particular case, we happen to disagree on whether or not it's appropriate.
I did go through your letter and your comments. I don't know if any of the board did.
Did you see the
Well,
responses?
I know the answer without asking. They almost wanna cut the project 1/3, right? We'll add up to a third.
If you accepted that we could only go 100 feet beyond, it would kill the project. And
Apparently.
I think it's appropriate to, just as a reminder to the board, that we're here as a result of a court agreement between the town of Wareham and the McCarthys, and the agreement between the town and the McCarthys is that approval of a solar project on this shall not be unreasonably withheld.
Well, I'm not a lawyer, so I don't know
Well,
what.
I'm just saying that's what's in the stipulation between the parties.
I understand, but that doesn't, it's irrelevant for us. We will do what we think it's right. Let me ask you a technical question.
Yes.
You and Charlie, what happen if they make the drainage basin larger?
Well, Mr. Chairman, let me just in a nutshell, when I design these drainage basins, and they do have a 2-foot overdig on the bottom.
You did those before? You did the
Prior.
Okay.
The original design had...
Can I cut you off for 1 minute?
Yes, sir.
Councilor Cirque, for your next hearing, are you continuing?
Yes.
All right. Can I table you, just so we could let him go? Okay, because I guess we have a long time. Sorry, I know, I understand, because I've been on the other side of the table, and I know what it is. We're just gonna jump quick to let him go on his way, so he doesn't charge the client. We're gonna go in the 17-18 RM LLC, 3035 Cranberry Highway. What day you would like to come back?
January 23rd,
January 21st. 3rd. 1 second. Okay. Can I get a motion to continue?
So moved.
17-18, okay, do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Oppose, abstain, we'll see you then. Thank you very much, Council. Your applicant will be happy, so you
Your
don't charge
pacing
them.
was well rewarded. Have a good night, thank you.
All right, so I guess we'll resume our Sunrise Development for the record 38-18. Go ahead. Sorry about
Mr.
that.
Chairman. So just briefly and in a nutshell, the design of these basins has not changed since the initial submission. So the shading that you see, that's the 2-foot overdig of replacement sand. And then we have these stone trenches that are wicks. And this design meets the rate and volume reductions that we're supposed to have, infiltrating at 1/4 of an inch an hour. And when we went out and we did the testing, we wanted to determine the slowest actual rate. The slowest actual rate was 1.83 inches per hour. And at 3 feet down, where the models are, it was 17 inches an hour and 36 inches an hour. And that's why we're confident that this is gonna work.
Charlie, at these numbers, would it work if he's so confident of the numbers?
There are two
let me-
things.
I know, but I guess in calculation and math and numbers, 1 and 1 is 2. It's never 2.1. So
It
it's
all-
a matter, okay.
It's not just a matter of numbers if the conditions don't match the numbers that you're using.
Okay, but he's saying the condition does. That's
That
now,
he has based.
with all due respect, let me say something.
All right.
If I agree with him, I'm disrespecting you, and if I agree with you, I'm disrespecting him. You guys, but you're both professional.
I don't
so
call
I have,
that
we have to
disrespecting
be.
either me or him. I think it's a case of trying to understand what the circumstances are and, with due respect to what they did and what he's calling the overdig. I took the elevations that they had shown in their plans and superimposed the elevations on the plan view to see where that elevation was with respect to that restrictive layer, which I am convinced is below that modeling line. When I did that, the bottom of the overdig was right at that line.
What elevation was this, do you know?
Well, they varied, because that, if you were to take a cross-section through that hill, you would find that layer of poor soil travels almost parallel with the surface of the ground right down to the bottom of the hill. The one thing that was different in the soil testing they did was in the southwest corner of the property, which is closest to the, well, there's a parking area for one of the buildings that is along that westerly side.
The westerly side?
The very westerly side, and it would, on the plan, it would be the very top
Top left.
portion.
Test pit 1.
Yeah,
Yeah,
right
oh,
up in
okay.
there. At that point, the same soil was 7 feet down. But every other location that they tested, that poor layer was about 3 feet down. And when I superimposed the elevations that they have shown in their table for the bottom of the overdig, it was at or very close to that restrictive layer. When they did the testing, when GZA did their testing, they only took 2 samples at a 3-foot elevation. They did not take more than 2. I don't know, yes, I do know, because their tests were done close to where the test pits were done. So only in 2 instances did they take those tests there. They didn't take them anyplace else, and they did not get down deep enough into that restrictive layer that's below the modeling to satisfy me that that's not the real restrictive layer that we should be talking about. If they had done the testing at that level and found a rate of 1.83, I wouldn't even be hesitating to say, fine, go ahead. But I'm not convinced that that took place. And knowing the way that water runs off that hill from my previous experiences, and what I know will happen if you strip the whole hill, what I also saw when I did the evaluation was when you dig out each of these basins, and you take the bottom elevation of the basin, and because the bottom elevation of the basin is flat, but the hill continues to climb, at some point in that bottom elevation, you're going to be hitting that restrictive layer, meaning that the water may, in fact, push right out the slope into the drainage basin from that restrictive layer. So there's enough concern on my part that it just does not support the density or the amount of surface area that we're going to be disturbing to put these panels in. And that's why my recommendation was keep the hill the way it is, reduce the panels to what it can take, which will reduce the amount of runoff and reduce the intensity and the impacts on the site.
I'm a little gray.
Okay?
So every one of these shaded areas, I'm calling it a little pond or retention area.
Yes.
You're saying that his test is before he excavated, digs it out, and he's saying it's...
What he would do would be, I assume, and I'm only assuming this based on what normal construction would be, that he will shape the bottom of these. He'll dig the bonds out to that elevation of what they're shown, and it varies from pond to pond from...
So you're saying after he digs it out,
Yep.
what he tested, he dug out? And then what's
Well,
there now
the
is
tests
gonna
don't show that they're in
be what you
exactly,
assume is there.
the tests were not done exactly where a lot of these areas were done. So he may not excavate in exactly the same spot where the test was done, but the testing and the test pit logs, which are in your plans, are consistent enough that I'm convinced that it's pretty uniform conditions throughout that site. So when he digs out one of the test pit area, or one of the pond areas to create it, he's gonna create side slopes on the uphill side, and you'll create a very shallow
How are these,
berm, shall we say, on
how
the
are
south
these
side.
tests, what do they do? They take a drill, a boring?
No, no,
How do you do it?
excavate.
They took a small machine, dug a hole, and...
Perk test, just like a
Like a
perk test.
perk test,
Sort
exactly.
of, but the infiltration test is slightly different. It takes a cylinder which they put in the ground, and they pour the water in the cylinder, and they allow that water to drop, and they
Right.
continue over a long period of time, and then average it out to be what the rate of infiltration will be through the soil. And depending on what they find, then you can assign an actual infiltration rate in terms of inches per hour to the soil.
GZA is an experienced
Let me-
geotechnical engineer.
And let me ask a question. The dark shaded, so I'm just looking at a point of view like of a contractor. If from middle of the project, right where the pad is, that middle, from here to the, almost to the highway, if you grade it flat, wouldn't that dramatically drop the running of water if they make it, like, if from 101 to proposed 110, the existing elevation up there is 111, so you get like 10 feet, like, no, 9 feet. See if you grade it, try to make it flat, the top portion, the whole north part, would that make a big difference?
Well, we don't feel that that would be necessary. Again, that would be
I'm
something
just-
that could kill the project, because now you'd have to remove all of that material from the site. The beauty of this plan, or the other benefit of this plan, I should say, is other than these basins, the rest of the array, it's gonna be, the trees will be cut, but
Right.
there's no grading taking place. That's all gonna be, all the low growth is gonna remain, other than, of course, people, it's gonna be disturbed as they install the panels. But, there's a tremendous amount of storage that we're creating on this. We obviously understand Charlie's concerns, because we met for an hour and a half and went over them. To, again, take the original, so a 1/4 inch an hour with a 2-foot replacement of sand, I'm not worried about what's happening 3 feet down if I'm calculating it at the surface, and I've got 2 feet of Title V sand underneath, and I'm saying it's a 1/4 inch an hour, and the testing results at 3 feet down were 17 and 36 inches an hour.
From
That's
quarter
why-
to,
that's why we only did 2, Mr. Chairman. And I'm sorry, I'm maybe talking a little too
that's
loud,
fine,
but
that's fine.
the reason they only did 2 is because they were instructed to find the slowest rate, which in this case, it was always at the 1 foot. When they went down to 3 feet a couple of times, it was much faster.
Mm.
So
If I-
apparently, there is a good vein of sand on top of that modeled soil, but we don't need to dig to China. We have very conservative numbers which show that at the base, at those existing ponds, we've reduced the rate and volume of runoff. We meet the stormwater management standards.
But you don't think you could,
We're responsible for our design, Mr. Rowley is not.
I do understand this, but you don't think it's economically feasible selling the fill and flatten it out a little bit?
That was investigated back when there were problems out here. With a certain construction company went out and they were trying to see if there was value in that material, and there isn't. But that doesn't mean that it's all clay. I mean,
Right.
you cannot refute the actual results.
I think there's, to just respond to your question, if you flatten it out, you'll be cutting into the soil. At this point, we would not know what the infiltration capacity of that soil is. So that in order, if you did that, if they agreed to flatten it out, it might impact the rate at which it runs from, say, this point over here to this point over here. But without knowing what the infiltration rate is of the remaining soil that you're building in, there's no guarantee it's gonna be any better. chances are it may be
Yes.
even
We
worse.
know the rate. We have the rate. The test pits, we have geotechnical engineers showing the rate. I understand Charlie got spooked there 40 years ago because it's rough soil. I've been working for McCarthy Properties for 30 years. I've been working on that site for 30 years, building buildings, doing site work. Water's not pouring out of the side of that hill. The side of that bank was cut by G. Lopes during the earth moving project, and when it was cut, water was not just billowing out of the side of the hill like you claim it's gonna happen.
I never said that, and I'm not suggesting that it will gush out of the side of the hill. I was not spooked 30 years ago, and I stand by my report to the board.
Right, I do, okay.
so-
This
but-
TP stands for test pit?
Test pits, yeah.
Test pit.
Test pits. But with all due let me say that, with all due respect, Charlie, I totally understand what you're saying, but in your letter here, it always imply, can I finish, sir? Sir.
Let the
one-
chairman
let me
speak,
finish.
please.
We'll take that, you'll have your chance. It seems that you imply that you believe. However, they saying they have real numbers.
Yes, they do have real numbers, Mr. Chairman. But if you look at where they took the information from and what they applied it from, you will find that they don't know what the rate of soil infiltration is at that point where that modeling took place. My concern is that when the water hits that, it's simply going to travel laterally, just as it does now, and will impact the storage capacity of those drainage areas that they're trying to build.
So.
It has nothing to
so you
do, I'm
believe-
not disputing what they did at the time. What I'm saying is that where they took the tests does not, in my view, give you the information that says these are the bottom conditions that you need to really address. When Mr. Rogers says, yes, they wanted to find the slowest rate, I agree, he should have found the slowest rate. My concern was they didn't go into the material that has the slowest rate. And because they did that, this is inconclusive, and I'm trying to say that that's not sufficient for me to say it's fine.
Okay, when, were you present and when they did the test
I
soil?
was not. I didn't even know when they did them. I know GZA, and I'm not suggesting that GZA does not know what they're doing. They probably tested where they were instructed to test, or what they thought. I asked at our meeting the other day whether or not they had the benefit of having the plan that showed the test pits and showed what was in the test pits. He said they did. So I was not there to witness what they did or have any input as to why they chose the locations they did. I can only go by the documentation that's been presented, and the documentation is here in the plans, which I feel is sufficient to question whether or not this is really going to work. And that's why it's behind my suggestion that you don't necessarily strip off the top of the hill.
All right, we'll talk. John, sir, you wanted to say something?
You actually said my point exactly. I'm no engineer, but it seems like we have one side based completely on assumptions, and I think this might happen, this might happen, and I've been around for a long time. I get that. But then I've got another fully qualified engineering company that's been around for a long time in this town saying, hey, you know, we've got hard figures showing exactly what is gonna happen. We're not just giving you all these assumptions. And I don't know why the tilt would be in that direction. Getting lost on that.
I just think he's concerned with the tests weren't done in the right spot. That's his main concern.
What's the chance to redo some
I
tests?
just wanted to
Go ahead.
to retrace the timeline a little bit, because we submitted our application on September 20th, and our first meeting was October 24th, and when we submitted in September, over, 3 months ago, we paid for the third-party review fee in full, and we expected on the 24th that the review would have occurred in that over a month, period of time. When we came to the meeting, apparently the town had not set up the account properly, so the review had not begun, but it did begin shortly thereafter. There was no meeting in November because of a quorum. 7 weeks passed. The testing was very tightly coordinated. We tested exactly what was asked to be tested. GZA is working on something like 50 solar projects right now. They're a very experienced geotechnical firm. And as a layperson, I'm being told by all of the engineers involved that the results were even better than what we expected. So we cannot afford to wait another month until January. We respectfully would like, you know, the board to vote to approve this project today. The way that the solar program works is once you get your final permit, which this would be, you can submit and reserve your block. The blocks, every day that we don't submit, the value that we get for the electricity over 20 years is reduced. That has an impact on the tax revenue that the town will receive from this project because the value of the project will be less. And so I just wanted to
I do understand you want to get your project approved, but with all the respects, I've been to before other boards in other towns, and sometimes we are the easiest board in the history of Massachusetts. I guarantee you that. So.
You need to get over to Mattapoisett, sir.
Yeah, would they have a fence installed? But anyway, so we are pretty reasonable and easy, and the time, I mean, I think we're more than fair with the time. And I'm sorry, I mean, sometimes it takes longer.
If it's a delay for more testing, 5 feet below the surface, my calculation at 1 foot down on these basins at 1/4 of an inch. So now you're going through 2 feet of replacement sand. Where that water goes once it's 3 feet beneath the surface, and you know, this being the crest of a hill, there's no water.
So you're saying the first 3 feet is nice, suitable sand?
I'm saying that each of these basins is roughly a 1 foot excavation below grade. And then we have 2 feet of replacement sand. And I calculate at the surface of the pond. And so the infiltration rate, even though I'm saying it's 1/4 of an inch an hour, is through 2 minutes an inch, or, you know, 13, 30 inches a minute soil. And so it is, we don't feel it's necessary to extend the time frame of this project to find out that it's 5 or 7 feet below grade that's you know, less than 1/4 of an inch an hour. To me, it's not necessary.
So Charlie, you think all these basins they're gonna overflow? You don't think they're gonna handle the runoffs? Seems to me awfully a lot of basins.
The calculations that they did were done twice. The first time it was done with a rate of 0.27 inches per hour infiltration. Even with a 10-year storm, at least 2 of the basins overflowed, went down the hill. With the recent calculations that they did, when they recalculated using a 1.83 inches per hour and putting in sand, the 100-year storm never ever came up to the floor of the basin. I find that incredible to believe, because it's assuming that rate is going to travel down through that poor material. I have a very significant concern that it will not.
But the book says you have to design for 25-year storm, right?
2 through 100.
You have to show that the 100-year storm will not have adverse impacts off the site.
And so
You
again,
do design for the 2, the 10, or the 25, and then you jump to the 100, and you do that calculation as well to see what happens. If you're getting overflow conditions when you've got a 10-year storm, to me, that's significant, because as you well know, you can have 10-year storms back to back without any problem at all. And if it's already up to the bottom of the basin during a 10-year storm, where's the rest of that water go?
Where does the water go now?
It rolls over the surface of the ground, infiltrates at whatever rate it's going to. A lot of it is held back by the vegetation that's at the top of the hill. In the slope that's there today, there are no trees, but there is it's a heavy, thick grass that's grown up over time. So there's a certain amount of that's held back. When it reaches the bottom of the hill, it goes into the 2 existing drainage basins that are there, or travels past them and over into the side slopes. And a lot of that runoff, the basins are connected by a pipe which has not been found or determined what the elevation is, so we don't know exactly where it is at this point. But when they overflow, they go into a stone swale that goes down toward the parking lot, discharges into a catch basin, goes down the parking lot, into the drainage basin at the foot of the hill, and ultimately down into Route 28.
All right, let's say they go out and build it, the way they design it,
Yep.
and it overflows. Is there a way we could condition it to come to review in a year or 2 or 3 or 5, or upon another storm?
I suppose
I
you
mean, you guys own all these property, right?
We're the ones at the bottom of the hill. If it flows out of there, it's flowing into my parking lot, which obviously I don't want to happen.
Yeah.
So I will be calling Joe and Bob to tell them to come collect their water
I
and get
think
it out
that's
of there.
in the lease. You negotiated that.
Yeah,
You
no,
can't do
I
that.
believe it's in the lease that the water's
It's
not.
right in the lease.
I know, what I'm trying to say,
Yeah, we
I mean, if it goes sour, I don't think it's gonna go sour according GAF engineering, but if it does, they're the one who's impacted it, then 28, but it's a long way before 28.
If it does, my 3 buildings at the bottom of it are impacted first. I have icy parking lots and tenants that are suing me, so I'm not gonna let that happen.
And we're also not introducing impervious surface. I mean, solar is the least impactful development that you can do.
That's true.
This is a commercial site, they want to develop it. You know, compared to a mobile home park with asphalt roads and roofs and all that
Yeah, I
impervious
understand.
surface, there's none here, except for one inverter pack.
I understand.
So, these gray areas that I see are intended...
dark gray, yeah.
The dark gray areas, they're intended to collect surface water
Correct.
and hold it, and either let it evaporate or percolate until the next rainstorm comes.
Correct, and they're
Can
all-
you tell me what the average rainfall is and what the capacity of these ponds are? Could they, you're talking 100-year storms and all that. Are you telling me that once in every 100 years, it's gonna rain enough to overfill these?
It won't.
Well,
He's
when-
designed a won't.
When Charlie says overflow, I mean, I modeled these ponds with a broad crested weir, basically.
Uh-huh.
So.
So what's the overflow refer to? When you say it's gonna overflow?
So, again, based on the conservative assumptions, which meet the standards, you know, let's say this basin, I don't know if I'm, you know, being told that, but these are all there's only 1.2 feet of water in these basins, because again, it's within the solar array. But I've got a 40-foot wide section in the calculations where if the storm is exceeded, you know, this basin would you know, overflow, the broad crested weir would have an inch of water, and so this basin would flow down into this one and down into this one, you know, all the while it's infiltrating, and then any overflow, of course, would go down into those existing basins. The design point is those existing basins.
And that's 100-year,
It's 7.6 inches of runoff in a 24-hour storm. So, you know, this is all woods with right now with a long time of concentration, and that sets the standard for what we can meet. And so we have, you know, panels down here that are just gonna, that grassed area underneath the panels is gonna flow, and it doesn't, you know, we can't capture that. But if, just looking at this plan and the number of basins, and each
So,
with 1.2
so in a
feet of
worst-case
water,
scenario, if everything overflows into the next to the next, and then it's gonna go down the street,
In
and
any
at the bottom of the
scenario.
street, there's a big, like, it looks like a cranberry bog, but it's a basin, it's gonna go in there.
right.
And then when it goes in there, there's an overflow pipe, and it's going down the street and into the river.
It's going under state drainage, then
wherever it's
behind
going,
Walmart.
it's gonna be at a smaller rate and with less volume than today.
Right, it's not worse than it is today if we did nothing.
The danger is only during the construction period.
I'm sorry?
Danger zone
During
during
the
construction.
construction period, it needs to be managed, and it will have an EPA strip. And so the construction has to be managed in a way so that until these disturbed areas, you know, get reseeded and growth. I mean, obviously, the calculations assume that all of those basins are vegetated and there's 4 inches of grass, let's say. And so during construction, it's gonna be very important to have stages of erosion control and to work on, you know, portions of the site at a time so that it's not all exposed, you know, at one time.
So the hay bales and the silt fences and all the jazz that comes along with it.
Well, and the, you know, hydroseeding as you go along, or spreading mulch as you go along, so that when you do get rain during construction, it's not so much the volume of water, but we don't want any of that silt and sediment to end up, you know.
All right, let me ask a question. What happen if you add one more basin in between where it says 11?
It adds more cost and it makes my numbers look good, but my numbers, you know, when we already meet the DEP stormwater standards and.
So you are holding on your numbers, you're betting on that your numbers
Absolutely,
100%.
yes.
All
Mr.
right.
Chairman, I just
Yes.
want to clarify one thing for the benefit of all here. When we talk about a 100-year storm or a 25-year storm or a 10-year storm, we're not talking about a storm that occurs once every 100 years. What you're talking about is a 100-year storm that has the intensity equivalent to what occurs the worst in 100 years. That storm could exist today and happen today. It could happen tomorrow. 2 in a row could happen. So when we talk about storm intensity, we're not talking about that it happens once in 10 years or once in 25. It's an intensity of storm that has that intensity that's not above that for a certain period. So it simply is a measure of the amount of rainfall, but that same intensity can occur 2 or 3 days in a row. Has nothing to do with it being on a 25-year cycle.
So you tell me the storm of 37,
Well, you could.
that happened in 37 is,
Whatever
that's
the
a
intensity
100-year
of that
storm,
is,
one attempt.
whatever the intensity of that storm was, I think they may have even suggested it's a 500-year storm. It could happen again the next year and still be a 500-year.
Correct, but it's been
It won't wait,
80 years.
it will not wait 500 years to occur again, is all I'm trying to say. It doesn't work that way.
Go ahead, sir.
Yes, and Charlie, I hope would agree, but the other way to look at it is you can look at it as a percentage. So a 100-year storm, every single year, you got 1% chance of getting that 7.6 inches of rain. A 2-year storm, you got a 50% chance every year of getting
I
that
know.
3.4 inches of rain.
Right. All right, so I guess it's gonna be up to the board to where they set their heart with who, with the JF or Mr. Rowley. Let's go to the other issues. Before we go quick forward, is there anyone in the audience wanna speak in favor? In favor, none? Against? Against?
It's neither in favor.
Or you could just make a comment, come forward, sir.
No comment.
Just say your name for the record.
I shall, Jim Manise, Cranberry Highway. Just so you know, I'm a proponent of solar voltaic arrays. You know, I think they're beneficial.
Just keep this next to
And,
you. You don't think they're beneficial?
well, no, I think they are. I'm in favor of it.
Oh, you're in favor, I said, you said you,
Renewable clean energy.
okay.
And, how many green cards were sent out on this?
The town handles this.
But they hand them to you too, right? So you know
Right, but
that they've been done.
so, believe me, it's
I'm
been
just-
done.
You know, I've just seen a number of these things come in front of the boards, planning board. And usually garners a number of people. So,
Looks like 15 is the answer to your, wait a minute, there's another, yeah, 15 is the answer to your question.
so those are the mobile homeowners, not the park owners.
The park owners, the
But not
mobile
the
home,
mobile
the mobile home is not a real
homes.
estate.
Well, well, yeah and no.
It's a no, you don't
They don't
notify
own the
them.
real property, but they own the home on it. It's a home. But
No, it's
anyhow,
not a home, it's
I
a
don't-
trailer. I wish it was a home.
Right. So, looking at that, and I think there was, Mr. Rowley may have mentioned, there's one area that pretty much gonna have a straight shot view. That should be taken into consideration. The 50 foot's a minimum. That's a minimum the board can impose.
Right.
So, I would take into consideration the people that live there, because they're gonna, at some time, wanna sell those homes.
They're not, again, it's a trailer. At any moment, they could pack it and drive it. So with all due respect, like I said, I wish there were homes, so they're not a real estate. The landowner is the real estate, they're not real estate. The tax rate they pay
Do
is
they pay
very
taxes on them,
minimal.
right?
Excuse me?
Do they pay taxes on them?
They pay as a car, like a car.
So what it can't do is impact or devalue the property value. And that is a property. It's not a real property in the sense, is your definition.
Correct, it's not a real property.
So if they want to resell it, they might have to ship it off the site. So what I'm saying here is to take into consideration the people that live there and to ensure that they're protected, so if they do want to sell their properties moving on, that they won't be impacted negatively by this. That's a concern. That was a big concern with the planning board hearing. And some towns have 200-foot buffers, right? Carver maybe?
I don't know.
Yeah. And it's a great idea. It's a great thing. How large is this array? How many? 3 megawatts. What's that?
Prefer you to address the board.
How,
They saying 3 megawatts. It's
How many
about 5,000 homes, I believe. Right.
how many acres?
How many acres the land? How many acres? Do you know how many acres the land?
It's 12-acre parcel, and I think we're at maybe 10.5-acre solar.
So roughly 12 acres, sir.
It's 15 acres, but that includes the access all the way up.
It's about 12 acres then.
And the solar is, what'd you say?
About 10 acres.
10 acres?
Yes.
Sir, if I can just
Go ahead.
interrupt for a minute.
Just-
I know
Yes.
the sideline setback in the industrial park is 10 feet if we were doing industrial buildings. We've done 2 recently at this site. We were well more than 10 feet. We've always been very gracious of our neighbors. I don't think any of the people in the trailer park have a complaint with the 2 buildings that were put up there. We made sure we screened them. We left over 75 feet of space between those buildings and the closest trailer. And if I were to walk that property line with you, we would see sheds and everything else that are over onto my side of the property that I never said anything about. So we have been very gracious in respects to dealing with the setbacks of the trailer park.
That's very, very, very good of you to do that. Again, I'm just looking at the people who live there, looking out, and I'd like to see some consistency with the decision-making between boards and how you determine the setbacks for the solar from properties. Some says of negative value impacts it, and therefore we're gonna deny it. I'm not saying to deny it. Again, I'm a proponent of solar arrays, and just to consider the neighbors, and if there are some going to have a clear shot of the solar array, maybe have a little more of a setback in that area.
Or landscaping.
Landscaping's all right. I mean, you can throw some arborvitae's up, but you could put in some pitch pines and some white pines. I mean, the quick fix is the arborvitae's. There's no natural vegetation going back in for some reason. It's always just a quick fix of some artificial tree going in there. Wasn't there, and that's not just for you. I'm saying this for most of them. We go to a quick fix. That's about all I have to say, and thank you for the time.
Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
Anyone else want to speak? Against, in favor? Here none. All right, let's leave the drainage thing aside a little bit and let's go for other stuff. And in Charlie's comment in number 5, now, you saying, Charlie, there's water on them. Do you believe because this, the till towards over the years on the bottom of the basins, if they clean them, would that work? I mean, this way they could operate better?
We discussed that the other day. I'm not sure how long those detention basins have been there. It's been a while.
I know
They do
last
have-
time I saw
They do
Joe
have
Barboza were working
water
on
sitting
them.
in them now, and it's been there long enough that you're beginning to see vegetation grow up into the water. Right now, it's frozen over, so you can just see the
You're
caps.
talking, but when you say number 5, you're talking
Yeah.
right here.
Item
Okay.
number 5 on the second page,
Yep, okay.
referring to, yeah. Part of it may be, the reason they're holding water is that the bottom may have sediment in it. It's quite possible, because I don't know that there was an awful lot of work done to revegetate slopes. There could have been. I was not involved with any of that work, so I can't specify. I can only see what I see today. So it may be possible that part of that is siltation on the bottom that's holding it in. My guess is that it may be a combination of that and the drainage conditions of the site in general.
But number 5, your comments also say if properly maintained, they're capable of storing some additional runoff from the slopes behind them.
They are, because if you look at the topography on all sides of those basins, even the side that's up against the pavement that is being utilized by the site right now, there's a fair amount of freeboard that's already there.
Okay.
So it could possibly take additional runoff. I don't know what the elevations of the connecting pipe are. Between the two, on the plan, it says it has not been determined at this time. And I'm not sure what the overflow elevation is that's in that stone swale that's on the westerly corner of it.
And in regard to the if properly maintained comment, that's like going in there and making sure that there's nothing blocking.
Cleaning out the bottom if there is sediment to allow the, hopefully the water would drop down a little bit faster. I'm not saying that's a guarantee, but certainly maintenance on that, as well as the maintenance of these new sites, should they be constructed, going to require maintenance. Mr. Rogers already suggested that it's important during the construction process. It certainly is, because I can guarantee that once you open up that soil and begin to grade it off, you're going to be intercepting the soil that is very, very loamy and tight. It's just the typical thing of glacial till, and when it gets wet, it gets like mud in soup. It does not dry easily. So when you're in that construction process, there's going to be a management of that. There's going to have to be a management of sedimentation as it goes downhill, the management of erosion. There's also going to have to be management of the site once it is finished, loamed and seeded, because you know that the grass isn't going to come up in 24
Right.
hours. So there are issues to be
I'm
dealt with.
assuming you guys okay with managing, the management during construction. All right, so as I see it right now, two major questions before us, Jake. Jen, so we have two major things. If we're gonna agree with Mr. Rogers, is it Rogers or Rogers?
Well, it's Rogers, but really
Mr.
you're agreeing with Mr. Madden.
Mr. Rogers or Mr. Charlie on the calculation, and if we agree, leaving the 50-foot buffer as proposed or the 100. The 50 is the law, I mean, the zoning bylaw asks for 50. Mr. Rowley recommends 100 to ease in the runoffs and to have.
Well,
No,
yeah.
I wasn't recommending a 100-foot buffer. What I was suggesting that the
For the
50-foot
runoffs,
buffer.
to minimize the runoffs.
What he's.
I was suggesting 100-foot back from the existing tree line to stop at that point with the construction and leave the upper area of the property alone.
350
When I'm
feet or
talking
so.
about the visual buffer against Great Hill, I'm still looking at the 50 feet, provided that it is dense cover, the way that a good portion of the site already is. But there are open spots where if you clear to that 50-foot line, you're gonna have a clear open space.
And I think we can resolve that because we're fine adding vegetation.
Okay.
To create a visual barrier.
Yeah, we
do that all
want a
the time.
special condition that's a performance standard that, you know,
It is.
between Mr. Buckland and.
So
Mr.
Charlie,
It is a minimum, but if you can
Right.
go to it if you feel that doing that is appropriate.
so from 495, you suggesting to cut down 300 feet down?
That's what I'm suggesting. Because the vegetation that's on the top of that hill right now serves as a means of not only slowing the rate of runoff down, but it also is a means of absorbing some of it through the root system of the vegetation that's there. And it's, what's gonna happen is that when you remove that, you're gonna increase the rate of runoff because of the soil conditions that are gonna be exposed.
And apparently JF disagree with what he's saying.
Well, no, I mean, that's why we have so many basins and so much storage and the overdig and the stone trench and the conservative infiltration.
How far are you guys off the highway from 495?
Well,
Where's the closest solar panel be from 495?
The closest,
Yeah,
To the
the fence, the fence.
so So we have, maybe about 5, well, I don't know if the fence is right on the layout line, I guess it probably should be, but, we've got 2 bounds, so we know right where that, the layout line is. 495 is lower than the back of this property. The access to the water tower is lower than this property, and Great Hill is lower than this property. And so, when you are concerned about a perched water condition, whether it's 3.5 feet down, that only occurs from the rain that's falling on our property. So we've got, about a 40 scale, so it's a little more, 5 to 10 feet. We've got our 20-foot access road. We're gonna be holding 10 feet to the panels. It's just really, this is the only area that needs to be supplemented. with
Screened.
plantings.
So it's about 25 feet
To answer your
from-
question, Jay, if you were traveling on 495 and you looked up, you'd be looking up the slope, you probably wouldn't see any of the panels,
Okay.
provided they have the buffer from the boundary to wherever they're putting it.
I was just looking at the past project we did, we gave them, I think it was a 100-foot buffer from 495.
In that particular case, if you're thinking the one that's down below Tyhonet Road,
Yeah.
that grade is entirely different.
Okay.
But if you were to travel on 495 today and try to see Great Hill Mobile Home Park as an example, which is right adjacent to this, you might see the top of the roof, so the very back edge of those last units, but that's all you'll see because everything's downhill from there and you're well below the gradient. So that's not a visual impact from 495.
And the access road, the access is a private, it's a private access, that's part of this lot. So there's a requirement to screen from a public road, but, you're driving parallel to the project on Route 28, and so that isn't an issue either.
Jen, what do you think?
I don't have anything.
Is this project serviced by Wareham Municipal Sewer, or is it all privately septic?
There's no sewer on this, in this area. Those existing
Stops
buildings
at
have
Toby
septic
Road.
systems.
Sewer stops at Toby.
Okay.
All right,
And we have an agreement between the town of Wareham and the McCarthy's saying that please go to the ZBA and ask for a reasonable approval for a solar project. And if that approval is withheld unreasonably, then they proceed back to Superior Court.
I totally understand this, but it doesn't mean, that's it doesn't mean,
If people aren't aware of that, they should be aware of it before they.
I understand, but it doesn't mean we could build something against the bylaw. Do you understand? I know under,
Yes.
you have legal matters with the town, but that's irrelevant. Okay, so now the conditions in the back, if to be approved, are you okay with all the conditions?
Yes, in my response letter, you'll see we stated no objection to any of those conditions.
We're agreeing to everything's reasonable, we have no problem with that whatsoever. We're trying to be
All right,
decent.
The exception-
anything you want to add?
Well, I think we did as best we could with some delays to accommodate the board's request, and I guess, I'm disappointed that we aren't in full agreement with Mr. Rowley. But we would not have, we were confident with the design that we filed, and we were certainly very happy that the permeability results proved out to be better, that the soil was better than we had assumed, based on, again, the manual. The manual tells us, look at the soil map, the Rawls rate of the quarters is sufficient. We readily agreed to go out and perform the test.
Charlie, let me ask you a question. Isn't some liability if an engineer stamp a project and it fails? They stamp in the project, say it fails, isn't?
If a design that they have put their stamp on proves to be insufficient to protect the interests of the public, I would say yes.
So,
So we're confident in the design.
if they back it, and they are I have to respect his stamp like I respect yours.
I respect their opinion, I stand by my own,
I
and
understand.
I'm not backing off of it.
That's, It's cool that Charlie's on the record for his opinion. His opinion is based on assumptions. GAF is making their,
I disagree with that, Jim, and I take offense to that. It is not based on assumptions, it's based on
Sure.
evaluation of data that's been presented to this board. So I refuse to accept the fact that I'm making assumptions. I am not.
well, I think
was asked to retract that.
assume was the words you were using earlier. That's what I heard. Maybe I
Not an
misheard
assumption
you.
on anything. It's based on an evaluation of data that's presented to me and to you. It's not an assumption on anything.
Going back to us, saying you stand by what you're saying, but like I said before, these not, science is, there's no gray area, it's black and white.
If we agreed that the tests were done in the appropriate lenses of soil, that's where the difference of opinion is.
Okay.
Mr. Rogers put 4 out of his 6 tests in the top 12 inches of soil. Then he took 2 tests and put them at 36 inches. Was it the same level as the underlying soil, which we don't know what the infiltration rate is? If he had done those other tests in that soil underneath, which is right at the level of that modeling, which is an indicator of where the water travels laterally, if he had done the soil tests in there and got 1.83 inches per hour, I'd say, fine, go to it. But that's not what they did.
Why
That's
you
what I'm
didn't do
saying is
that?
not right. And I'm basing my evaluation of the data that's been presented. It's got nothing to do with just an assumption of pulling something
Okay.
out of the air.
Why,
Sorry.
I mean, you had the machine, why didn't you do it?
As I stated before, because the very first test that we did, and it's in the report,
Okay, I understand.
so the very first test that we did, at 1 foot down, it was 1.83. And at 3 feet down, at the layer of the models, it was 39.6 inches an hour. If we had done, again, it was sort of a decision was made that, you know, we need to establish the slowest rate. So the second test that we did at 3 feet down, which is at the elevation of the models, was 8.3 inches an hour.
And the other tests, and the other pits, you did that
Well,
too?
there were, the other ones were 1.83 and
How deep you went?
14.04.
How deep you went?
On those, that was,
1 foot down is the design elevation of the bottom of the basin, and that's why we did it there. 3 feet down is the elevation of the bottom of the replacement sand. So the 2 that we did 3 feet down were much faster than all the other ones that we did at 1 foot down. So rather than spending 3 days at the site with GZA, we spent a day and a half at the site. And then I recalculated based on the 1.83, even though at 3 feet down, it was 14.
So you didn't think, because you had a better result, you didn't think it was necessary to go deeper in the other one?
Correct. We did not feel it was necessary to do more than 2 tests, since those 2 tests were much faster than all the others.
so I used the word assumption on Charlie, and I'm gonna use the word assumption on you now. Is it fair to say that you assumed if you did additional tests, they'd be the same as the 2 that you did?
Well, it's a...
Is that how you decided to go 1.5 instead of 3 days?
Well, we felt like we had beaten a dead horse, that, okay, there was, even the 1.83 was so much better than my .27.
So regardless what the other tests come out, you have enough drainage on the first 2 pits. So that's what you're saying, regardless what the test result come out on the others, you can still handle it on these 2?
Yes, because the numbers show compliance with the stormwater management standards using .27.
Do you agree, Charlie? So he is saying he only did
my
1 feet, but
experience-
he said regardless, whatever it comes out, the other one, his 2 bottom basins is gonna handle it.
My experience dealing with glacial soil is that you can dig down 3 feet, sometimes 4 feet, and be in reasonably good overburden that will percolate reasonably well. But as soon as you hit that layer, which is a restricting layer, all of a sudden you'll hit into stuff that's almost impossible to dig. They did not put any test in that material below the modeling line, which is an indicator of where there is a point where the water will no longer go down at a rapid rate, but will travel laterally. And in my experience, they should have done some testing in that limiting soil to be sure of what they had. They chose not to, which is their choice. They can do it wherever they think they want to. I happen to disagree that that was sufficient information to say that it will work as they say.
All right.
If they're comfortable with that, go with it, but I'm gonna stick with what I'm saying.
How's the board feel? How do you feel?
Not really sure yet.
Well, you wanna have a way before, to see which way we wanna.
I tend to agree with Charlie. I wish, they did just go down a little deeper, but they have the proof, right in front of us that it's gonna work as it is. But I still
Jen,
wish-
what do you think?
What's the time and expense of going back and doing another round of testing?
It's time. It's gonna take them.
Once the water is 3 feet or 2 feet below the surface of these basins, it's gone as far as the drainage report is concerned. You know, where it goes from there is where it's gonna go today. So, you know, we don't have to evaluate 3 feet below the basin and say that that water at a certain amount of time is gonna end up down at the bottom of the hill. You know, we don't want water in these basins.
I understand you don't.
And, you know, again, based on the smaller number, each of these is gonna be dry in 72 hours. Now, it's gonna be a lot less than that
All
because
right.
of that replacement sand.
Okay. So how you feel about it?
I'm tending to lean towards GAF's design.
All right, well, here's the deal. You got one person kind of going with Charlie so far, and that's not looking good for you. You need all four. So either you want to continue, and I could, if, with all the respect, let me tell you how it works. You know, but let me explain to them. If we close the public hearing, we pull a vote, and it doesn't go, it's
You're
dead.
done.
Then you're back to legal matters. I understand this. That's, we have to do our job. The other thing is, we can continue it, do the testing with Charlie, and somehow, when you guys together, there's a standard practice. I'm not an engineer. I'm an electrical engineer, not a civil engineer. So there's a standard practice that you have to follow. You can't, I'm sure you both know how to follow, and you can't dispute it if you're both there.
Well, the standard practice was followed by GZA. I get the fact of what Charlie's saying. I'm just saying, I don't care what the rate is 3 feet beneath the bottom of these basins or 5 feet beneath the bottom of these basins. I care very much about what the rate is through the loam and through the 2 foot of replacement sand and getting to that 3 foot.
I do understand, but what's the wish of the applicant? To close and get a vote or continue? That's a wish you have to make. You both the applicants, right? Who's the? Oh, the applicant. What do you like to do?
And
You have the,
ask the
Well,
question.
how strongly does this member feel that additional testing 5 feet below?
I'm ready to vote for you guys.
For us, okay.
you are?
Yeah.
You willing to vote?
And we're more than happy to do any contingencies afterwards.
As long as there's some guidelines and things that they have to do.
Right. The GAF has designed this according to the stormwater management plan. That's what this whole thing is designed upon.
All right.
I was just stating, I wish, you know, we could do that, but if we're gonna hold everything up and mess this project up, you know, let the rest of the board decide.
All right.
If there was, let me ask you a question hypothetically, if there was a calamity at this site sometime in the future, based on stormwater runoff, Mr. Rowley's on record of his position, and it substantiated his position, would it therefore create a bigger burden on GAF and the resolution of the calamity?
They're liable.
Well,
We have to-
yeah, I mean, we're not concerned about
Okay,
our
I just,
relationship with
if you
the
guys are
town.
standing behind your work and I'm all done with questions.
I'm not so sure if you heard, but part of our lease with Sunrays for this property, because like I said, we own the 2 properties below there, is that no water can leave the site. It was one thing we made clear with them. So they're gonna make sure it happens, we're gonna make sure it happens, because again, I don't want their water in my property.
Absolutely, I'm sure you both, everyone here and as well as Charlie, everybody wants a good project. I'm sure that's the intent with everyone.
And our VP of construction, who's done solar for 10 years, we pushed back on GAF pretty hard. We thought this was over-engineering with the amount of stormwater basins. They convinced us it was necessary, but this is more than we've seen on such a small project. It's, 50% of the site is retention.
All right, anyone else want to add something? Because I would like to close this public hearing. If anyone, are you done adding things? Charlie, would you like to add in?
No, I think I'm fine.
All right. Okay, what's the wishes? Want to close it?
I make a motion, we close the public hearing.
Okay, do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Jen, all in favor to close, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, oppose, abstain. Okay, it's closed. So wishes.
I'll move to approve the project.
Okay, we have a motion to approve the project. Is there any discussion on the approval?
Any conditions anybody wants to add?
Discussions and, well, it's gotta be, if it.
Standard conditions.
Standard condition and the recommendation, and the conditions that Charlie did, you guys agreed to them? 6 to 9. From 6 to 9?
My motion doesn't require 100-foot from the tree line.
6 to 9, the conditions from 6 to 9. Okay, so, that's the motion by Jim. Somebody want to second it?
Okay.
Second by Jake. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Jake? All due respect, Charlie, I have to say yes to.
Your call.
And I hope, no offense to you, but,
I don't take offense.
I greatly appreciate your comments, and I went through them and went through them,
Glad
I
your
went through
comments are
them.
on the record, that's for sure.
But if he stands behind his work, I guess his stamp is as respectful as yours, I believe. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
All right.
Let's get this stuff wrapped up. And let's get this one.
Executive appeal of 218, who appealed it? Executive session.
That's for us to discuss that lawsuit, so that we don't have to do it on the public record. So what are we approving here? This past one, let's get this finished.
Yeah.
Is this,
It's a standard condition.
is it a special permit, or is it a?
Special permit.
Not detrimental. Et cetera.
Okay. Standard condition plus attach this 6 to 9. Plus these conditions,
Are we?
the bond and all that.
Rowley, number 6 through 9, attached.
Report dated 12/10/2018. I think that's the font of the letter, 12.
Let's put that right in here, so that,
Yeah, I remember that.
and
I'm not gonna sign it, I'll just make sure she did them. I'll go to the office, have everyone else sign. I'll make sure she put the conditions, I'll go sign it.
you're not gonna sign it until you see it in there.
Right.
Fair enough.
All right, Jasmine, I'll go to the office, make sure you enter these decisions, and I'll sign it in the office. I'll give you the benefit so you don't have to go to the office.
Oh, thank you.
All right, Brad, do you wanna come forward? 6-18, 35 and 39 Priscilla Ave, minor modification.
Which one is this? Okay,
We table
yeah,
on the-
3B.
All right, so what is it?
This has already been approved, and you're looking for a modification, is that correct?
Correct.
All right. Just name and address for the record.
Good evening, Brad Bertolo, JC Engineering.
Richard
Smith. Richard Smith.
Okay, what is it?
This project was before you earlier this year for the demolition of a single-family house and the construction of a single-family house. The site is located in the R130 district, which requires 100-foot front setback requirements. The lot itself is only 100 feet deep, so the pre-existing structure that was there, that was recently demolished, plus the project that was approved by this board, didn't meet zoning bylaws in regards to the front setback. At the time of the installation of the foundation, it was determined there was a slight adjustment in the rotation. I do have a picture to show the foundation when we performed the foundation as well. I'll pass this around.
We gave you the variance for that, didn't we? For setback.
Yeah, but they're off by a foot, is what I think I'm reading here quick. They were gonna be 20.3 from the street, and they're now 19.3. Is that correct?
Correct. There was a rotation in that. The contractor was working within a bank cutting into the hill. And as you can see on the picture that's passing around, there's a pretty steep cut, very sandy. And apparently some of the stakes that we set were disturbed. So the location along the pond remained the same. Actually, it was about 2/10 further from the pond in one corner. And the other corner pulled away from the pond, which set the location of the front of the structure 1 foot closer to the street. It also provided a slightly greater setback from the side property line. Again, this was under a special permit through the town, and according to the commissioner, Mr. Requena, didn't have an issue with it, but he doesn't have the ultimate say in modifying a special permit. Again, the structure didn't change.
It was a variance, not a special, or tearing and replacing, but it was a variance, wasn't it, this permit?
Special permit, I have.
It was?
I have
Pull the folder over here.
Okay. Why didn't you stake it on the hole when it's tight like that?
We did stake it in the hole. The issue was the front portion of it kind of collapsed, the bank, which disturbed some of the stakes in the front. So that was kind of a reason why they squared it up off of some stakes in the rear by the pond that were left alone or untouched from any disturbance. And
All right.
so we feel that, you know, it is 1 foot closer to the front, but the house is set substantially lower than the street, keeping the same top foundation grade, so visually within the neighborhood, we feel it's not substantially more detrimental than the location as originally approved. The house hasn't really moved side to side, so there's no real impact to any abutter that's further to the west from this property. As you see to the north is just a vacant lot that's owned by the person to the north, no direct house in that direction.
Oh, okay, this,
And we meet zoning setbacks to the south for that abutter of greater than 30 feet.
all right. Now, okay, so how's the board feel? Do they feel, you guys feel it's a minor modification or major? Jen?
I guess there was just a mistake made, and they're asking us to accept it.
So I don't have to rip the foundation out.
It'd be kind of expensive to move the foundation.
You know, previous board made me move it once.
I know,
Six
more than
inches.
once, I've heard this. If the
What I
board feels,
did, I
if the board
built
feels.
another wall and just left the other wall, but put the house. And
Yeah,
just
I got
cut the
it.
other wall. Anyway, okay, so since you guys feel it's a minor, what's your wishes? Is it your wishes to grant it?
Yeah, I
Somebody
think
make a
let's just
motion.
give them the minor if they, I don't think Mr. Smith's gonna be in front of us again if J.C. Engineering was in front of us again with the exact same problem, I'd say, wait a minute, but I think shit happens.
Okay, can we have a motion?
I make a motion to approve.
Okay, we have a motion to grant the modification for a special permit. Special permit was 6-18, 35 and 39 Priscilla Ave. Do I have a second on that?
Second.
Second by Jake, all in favor? Say aye. Aye, oppose, abstain. So it's 4-0-0.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We
Is
don't
there
need to
anything
sign
left, sir?
anything, or, we
I
don't,
don't think so.
just, it's on the record that we know
If she-
about it.
Jasmine, if you need signature, just.
Let us
You
know.
you don't need a signature for minor, do you?
Yeah, you do. Because you have to record it in order for
Yeah,
it to be
that's
effective.
So
right.
she'll have to provide something, we don't have anything in the. file.
Jasmine, when you have it ready, just let us know, we'll come and sign it. Thank you. All right, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Why don't we leave the minutes till next time so we could all read them? So Jasmine,
Let's get these in the folder here.
Jasmine, can we leave the minutes for the next hearing?
Just resubmit them.
If you guys have a chance, read the minutes,
Yeah.
okay? Because I didn't have a chance to look at 'em. And
we good
I
here.
guess this is it.
This is the one that you're gonna,
Okay, and that one goes
what do we got here? Where's this go?
All right, any other things? We have an executive session.
We are recording?
All right, very well.
So, go ahead.
Okay, so we have an amendment for tonight's meeting. We're gonna reopen the public hearing. It's the Wareham Zoning Board of Appeals, Wednesday, December 12th, 2018. It's a little late right now, but we're reopening the public
After we
hearing,
came
I
out of
said.
executive session.
And it was after executive session. It is 8:30 PM. We have some correspondence came to us within the last 48 hours. Jim, you better to explain it.
We have the decision that was made for Dakota Partners had a formatting issue. She's reformatted the decision. So we need to accept the formatting. None of the words have been changed. So I make a motion that we accept the formatting change in this decision.
Second that.
Second by Jake, all in favor, say aye.
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 Aye, oppose, abstain. Also, we need to sign the Mylar.
And so I make a motion that we sign the Mylar as provided to us.
And that was dated November 9, 2018 by the professional land surveyor BSC.
The decision was on October 24th, 2018.
Right, and the engineer signed November 9, 2018.
Yep.
All right, so all in favor to sign the Mylar, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, oppose, abstain. Now we make a motion to adjourn.
So moved?
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, oppose, abstain. Thank you, Bob.
So you guys can come over here and sign this thing,
Okay.
Jake and Jan.
If we don't say aye, do we have to?